It must be getting late in the day if you've dragged the bean counter out to talk to you about money. But I would just make this plea at this point, an accountant's for life, not just for the 23rd of October. When you're all on the phone to your treasurer asking about what does this mean for us and how could they possibly do this to us, remember we are there all the year round. But asked to come along to talk to you about today, can lean enhance public services? Well, I guess you wouldn't be here if you thought it couldn't. But particularly something I think that is quite an interesting slant to look at, which is certainly for the last 15 years or so, spending reductions have been seen to be targeted against poor performance. We've had a very performance-driven culture whereby if you're not seen to perform, if the inspection regime isn't positive in your sense, then you can expect some kind of penalty, particularly in and around local government, but certainly in and around sort of the NHS and government departments. I think that the difference that we now face, and perhaps the uncertainty that we now face, is that the spending cuts that we're going to see, albeit that some areas are protected, and it'll be interesting to see just how much, but we are going to have to look to reduce costs in high-performing areas. There is going to be a squeal of unfairness that says, I am a high-performing, productive service that is recognised and valued by my customer, and you want to get 40% costs out of me. That is not fair. Now, we've not faced that, certainly, since the time in the 80s, and whether we ever faced reductions like that then. And so the question is, are we really geared up to take money and to reduce costs within first-class services and maintain and improve them? And the question that this is seeking to address, is there a place for lean within that debate? And what I hope to do over the next few slides is just offer up an opinion as to whether lean has a role to play, and certainly give you a CIPFA's findings and our analysis, having worked with the public sector in an awful lot of transformation projects. So what I thought I'd do in the first instance is sort of turn the question on its head, by rather than saying, what can lean do for me, is say, well, what is a first-class public service? For a number of years now, we've all done the tick box. Most organisations have followed whichever inspection regime has been brought to bear. We've all gone along the line of saying, well, I must be excellent because I've got 4 stars. Does that really make us excellent? And now that the inspection regimes, particularly the Audit Commission, is being scaled back, how do we prove that we are a first-class public service? So, and some of these might be controversial. They're not necessarily a standardised definition, but there's certainly one that we at CIPFA think should be recognisable and should be accepted. The first, that a first-class public organisation meets the customer's needs, not the organisation's. It's not about your own internal desires. It's not about, how do we best configure to make the best play of this. It's how do we make the best needs. It's about people, not policy. And certainly I think the clue to what our public service is about is in the word public, rather than perhaps the word service. It's responsive to changing demands. I'm not the same person I was a few years ago. You're not the same people. We don't live in the same areas. We're continually told we have an ageing population, we have a differing population, demographics are altering. Yet what we tend to have is, I've spent many years in debate, demographics are changing, demand is increasing, I therefore need more resource in order to preserve my service. Well, that's not the game anymore. Things change, people change. Do services really change? Have services really changed? I think it's debatable across the sectors, and there's obviously some excellent examples that are coming out of, and you've heard about some today. Is it enough? Well, we will only know perhaps towards the end of this year. Accessibility is a huge issue. We all think it's got to be accessible. We all design services. People will sit in policy committees and design services. Are they actually thinking about designing them for those who need the service, or are they designing a one-size-fits-all? And what we found, certainly from research that we've done, is if you look at an awful lot of front-facing services, there is a large percentage of the population who don't want to engage with them because they don't need them. But are we designing services for everybody's needs, or are we designing services that actually meet the needs of those who use them? Safer territory here, I think, certainly from CITFA's point of view. Best use of resources, minimise waste. Enough to do the job. Now, you know, safe territory, how many managers out there would be satisfied with enough resources to do the job? We come from a culture where resources are power. Staff numbers are power. You know, just having enough to do the job is not a culture, and I've been in local government finance for 25 years. Enough to do the job is not something that is particularly prevalent within the industry that I worked in. And is accountable for the resources it uses, cost and performance. You would expect that, and I would hope that everybody knows that. It's not our money, it's the taxpayers' money. So a first-class public service would do all those things. Would Lean have a role to play in that? Okay. Public services are not delivered in isolation. I mean, I think you heard an example this morning. I know Haringey got a mention this morning. There are a number of organisations that are determined to be good organisations, but on the back of one service failure, come crashing down. You know, Alison from HMRC said all the good work came crashing down on the loss of 2 discs. Nothing to do with whether it's a good or a bad service. We need to recognise that public services, single services, are not delivered in isolation. They're part of organisations. Lean looks at organisational culture. It looks towards overall organisation. It would seem, and certainly in my opinion, to fit quite nicely. Lean requires an end-to-end process that's customer-focused. You don't just stop at the point in which you engage the customer. It's not just about the way in which the processes work internally. Again, would fit quite nicely into the definition of a first-class public service. It's easier to change the way staff work than the way customers behave. And I think the examples you've heard today really bear that out. That, you know, we may all say, it's the public, they're doing things wrong. Sorry. They will behave in the way that they do. It's far easier for us to adapt to the changes within the country than for them to change to fit our services and processes. And to be truly lean, we need to be flexible how resources are deployed. And I think this is a very difficult one for the public sector. Interested to hear comments about unions and things like that. We work in boxes. We work to job descriptions. We work to titles. We work to status symbols. Lean would suggest, well, no. You find the right people to do the right things. Is that something that really we can do? So, does Lean work? 5 recognised principles. Yeah, okay, you've been through those. We all know those that are there. The ones I particularly like, that mean more to me, were actually later than the original Lean principles, and these were written in English as well, which I particularly like. Things like don't waste the customer's time have a big resonance with me in terms of, we all walk out of here and go and be customers when we've finished being lean people for a minute, and we're all frustrated by the amount of time that we have to waste dealing with public services out there on the streets. It's important to make the link, I find, at times. But this is about, providing what customers want, and I think, again, you've heard an awful lot of examples today that where it's working, particularly in HMRC, that's what they've done. They've taken this, whether or not they handed, that they lived the Bible of these things is another matter. But clearly, you can see that that's what's actually happening.